Imagine a man whose face is etched onto the $10 bill, yet whose name was once a curse whispered in the halls of power. A man who built the very foundations of the American empire but died with nothing but a bullet in his gut and a reputation dragged through the mud of a public scandal. This is not the sanitized version of history found in textbooks. This is the story of a bastard, an orphan, a survivor who crawled out of the Caribbean abyss to outthink, outwork, and outlast his enemies, only to be brought down by his own internal ghosts. Alexander Hamilton was the most brilliant mind among the founding fathers, and his life was a dark thriller defined by one relentless, suffocating truth: he was a man who had everything to lose because he started with absolutely nothing. The story begins in the shadows of the Caribbean, on the island of Nevis. In the mid-18th century, the law was a blunt instrument used to crush the weak, and Hamilton was born into its crosshairs. His mother, Rachel Fawcett, was a woman trapped in a marriage that felt more like a prison. Her husband was a man twice her age, wealthy, cruel, and possessive. When she finally fled his abuse, she didn't just leave a home, she became a fugitive of the social order.
Guilty.
Under the archaic laws of the time, she was branded a fallen woman, stripped of her rights, and denied the ability to ever marry again. When she found love with James Hamilton, Alexander's father, their union was considered a crime. Alexander was born illegitimate, a bastard child in a society that used that word like a brand of hot iron. His childhood was a sequence of traumas that would have broken a lesser spirit. By the age of 9, his father had abandoned the family, unable to bear the weight of their poverty and social shame. By 14, Alexander lay in bed next to his mother as they both battled a deadly yellow fever. He survived, she did not. Imagine a boy of 14, waking up from a delirium only to find his mother cold beside him, their few belongings seized by her legal husband, and himself left with nothing but a pile of books and a head full of ambition. He was poorer than the beggars on the streets of New York, a child of the colonies with no lineage, no money, and no future. But he had a mind that functioned like a precision engine. He worked for a merchant house, logging 16-hour days, mastering the dark arts of international trade, accounting, and logistics by the time most boys were learning to shave. He was a dry sponge for knowledge, soaking up every scrap of information he could find. When a hurricane leveled the island, Hamilton wrote a description of the carnage so vivid, so hauntingly poetic, that the local merchants realized this boy was a dragon in a shallow pond. They raised a collection to send him to the mainland, to the King's College in New York. They didn't realize they were sending a spark to a powder keg. Hamilton didn't just want to learn, he wanted to reinvent the world that had rejected his mother. When the American Revolution broke out, Hamilton didn't just join the fight, he became its strategic architect. If Thomas Jefferson was the philosopher of the Revolution, the Ronaldo of politics, refined and polished, then Hamilton was the messy, raw, divine talent that seemed to come from nowhere. He caught the eye of George Washington, who saw in the young man a reflection of his own iron will. Hamilton became Washington's right-hand man, the Dekung who managed the impossible logistics of a starving army. He was the Zhuge Liang of the American camps, drafting orders, negotiating with French allies, and plotting movements while others slept. But Hamilton was restless. He didn't want to just write history, he wanted to bleed for it. At the Battle of Yorktown, the final, desperate climax of the war, Hamilton begged for a command. He led a nighttime bayonet charge against Redoubt 10, a suicide mission where his men were ordered not to load their guns so they wouldn't accidentally fire and give away their position. In the pitch black, they climbed the walls, leaping into the enemy trenches with nothing but cold steel and raw courage. In 10 minutes, the fort was theirs. It was a moment of pure, cinematic adrenaline, the kind of bravery that makes a man a legend. But even as the war ended and the British surrendered, a darker conflict was brewing in the shadows of the new nation. The United States after the war was a collection of 13 fractured, bickering states on the verge of collapse. There was no money, no unified law, and no sense of national identity. Most of the founding fathers were content to return to their plantations, but Hamilton saw the abyss staring back at him. He knew that without a strong central government, the country would be devoured by European powers or succumb to internal rot. He locked himself away and produced the Federalist Papers, 85 essays written at a breakneck pace, arguing for a constitution that would bind the states together. He was the man who sold the idea of America to the Americans. Without his relentless, aggressive persuasion, the Constitution would have died in the cradle, and the United States would have been a footnote in history. But greatness creates enemies, and Hamilton's rise was met with a wall of aristocratic resentment. Men like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison looked at this Caribbean immigrant and saw a threat. To them, he was a monarchist, a man who wanted to build a financial system that favored the wealthy and the urban over the rural farmer. The conflict between Hamilton's vision of a strong, industrial federal government and Jefferson's vision of a decentralized agrarian society became the defining war of the American soul. It was a battle of ideologies, but it was also deeply personal. Hamilton was abrasive, sharp-tongued, and refused to play the game of polite politics. He was a man who lived with his guard up, a result of a childhood where the world was always trying to take what he had. This internal vulnerability led to his greatest mistake. In the summer of 1791, a woman named Maria Reynolds appeared at his door in Philadelphia, claiming her husband had abandoned her and she was in desperate need of help. Hamilton, a man who had grown up without a stable home and who felt a deep, almost pathological sympathy for the downtrodden, fell into a trap. He began an affair with Maria, only to be confronted by her husband, James Reynolds, who demanded hush money to keep the secret. For a year, Hamilton was blackmailed, paying off Reynolds to protect his reputation and his marriage to Eliza Schuyler, the daughter of one of New York's most powerful families. Years later, his political enemies got wind of the payments. They didn't care about the affair, they thought they had caught him in an act of financial corruption, using government funds to speculate on the market. Faced with the choice of being labeled a corrupt politician or an unfaithful husband, Hamilton chose a path that shocked the nation. He wrote the Reynolds Pamphlet, a 95-page public confession that detailed every sordid aspect of the affair. He laid his soul bare, proving his financial innocence by sacrificing his personal honor. It was a move of cold, calculated brilliance, but it was social suicide. The public, who had idolized him as a model of Republican virtue, was revolted. His political career was effectively over. The scandal broke his heart, but it didn't stop his influence. He continued to work from the sidelines, even helping his rival, Thomas Jefferson, win the presidency over Aaron Burr.
Your philosophies
Why?
are dazzling, Thomas.
Because Hamilton believed that while Jefferson had wrong ideas, Burr had no ideas at all. Burr was a man of pure ambition, a dark mirror of Hamilton. Where Hamilton was fueled by a vision for the country, Burr was fueled by a hunger for power. The two men circled each other for years, their animosity building until it reached a breaking point in 1804. Hamilton had spent years blocking Burr's path, calling him a dangerous man who could not be trusted with the reins of government. Finally, Burr challenged him to a duel. In the early 19th century, a duel was a test of honor, a way for gentlemen to settle disputes with lead and gunpowder. Hamilton, haunted by the death of his own son in a duel just 3 years prior, faced a moral crisis. He didn't want to kill Burr, but his sense of honor, the same honor that had driven him out of the Caribbean and into the halls of power, wouldn't let him back down. He felt he had to show up to protect his manhood and his legacy. On a cold July morning in Weehawken, New Jersey, the two men stood 10 paces apart. Hamilton, according to many accounts, intended to throw away his shot to fire into the air as a sign of moral superiority. He wore his glasses, squinting through the morning mist. When the signal was given, Hamilton fired high, striking a tree branch. But Burr did not miss. He fired a bullet that tore through Hamilton's liver and lodged in his spine. Hamilton collapsed, his life's blood staining the ground of the country he had built from nothing. He died the next day in the arms of his wife, Eliza, leaving behind 7 children and a mountain of debt.
How could you?
The aftermath
Look at what
was a
you've
scene
done.
of pure, tragic irony.
I regret nothing.
Burr was treated as a pariah, his political life ruined by the very shot that killed his rival. Eliza Hamilton, the woman he had betrayed with his infidelity, became his greatest defender. She lived for another 50 years, spending every waking moment interviewing his peers, collecting his papers, and making sure the world understood that Alexander Hamilton was not just a man of scandal, but the man who had saved the American dream. She founded the first private orphanage in New York City, a tribute to the orphan boy she had loved, ensuring that other children wouldn't have to suffer the cold abandonment that her husband had faced. Hamilton's legacy is the world we live in today. He was the one who realized that a nation is not just its land, but its credit, its banks, and its industry. He looked 300 years into the future and saw a global superpower while others were looking at their backyard gardens. He was a man of deep, dark contradictions, a genius who could solve the nation's debt but couldn't solve his own heart's longing for validation. He was a bastard who gave birth to a nation. In the end, the dark thriller of Alexander Hamilton's life is a reminder that history is not made by perfect men. It is made by those who are willing to fight, to bleed, and to be misunderstood. He was a man born into a world that told him he was nothing, and he responded by building a world that could never forget him. He died in the dirt of a dueling ground, but his vision lives in every skyscraper, every stock exchange, and every heartbeat of the American experiment. He was the outsider who became the ultimate insider, the immigrant who defined the identity of a continent, and the tragic hero who proved that even if you can't choose where you start, you can damn well choose where you stand.